Today's topic is word pairs that you may be using incorrectly and driving editors crazy. If you've got 5 minutes, I've got 5 tips for you to help you avoid the mistakes. You know, the English language is a funny thing. We've got many words in our language that all mean the same thing. And the main reason for so many different words in our language is because of its historical roots. At its root, English is a Germanic language. It's influenced by Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse. But it also has influences of other languages, Romance languages like Latin and French, and also some of our words derive from Greek. For example, in the English language, there are many different ways that you can say that something is beautiful. And many of them have a slightly different nuance, but they mean essentially the same thing. But on the other hand, what about all those words that don't mean the same thing, but sound very much the same and are misused so frequently when people speak? And when you speak, it's here and it's gone, but when you write it down and you write down the word incorrectly, it's there forever for everyone to see. Using these word pairs incorrectly can cause people to misunderstand your message. It also makes you look kind of dumb, and it drives editors crazy. Back in episode 21, we looked at 5 of these pairs of words. Let's look at 5 more today. Word pair number 1. Affect versus effect. Now, wouldn't it be so simple if we were able to say the difference is one of them is a noun and one of them is a verb? It's not that simple. In fact, what we're really looking at here is 2 sets of word pairs, because affect can be a noun or a verb and effect can be a noun or a verb. Let's look at them a little bit more closely. So let's sort out the word affect first. Have a look at this. Affect as a noun means facial expressions, gestures, postures, vocal tones that accompany an emotion. And here's an example of that in a sentence. Susan's flat affect suggested she was indifferent to the situation. But now if we look at affect as a verb, it's quite different. And in fact, we even say it differently. Affect, we say affect, but it's still spelled the same way. So your spell checker isn't going to help you here. Have a look at this. Affect as a verb, affect, means to have an impact on something, to cause a change, to make a difference. And here's an example in a sentence. Susan's indifference affected the way her husband responded. So, Susan's flat affect affected her husband. You can use affect and affect in the same sentence and they mean 2 different things. Now, if you were to look this up in the dictionary, the word affect or affect, you'd find that it has a few other meanings, but these are the main ones, and these are the main ones that concern people and mix them up. So what about the word effect or effect? Let's first look at effect as a noun. An effect is a change that happens as a result of something else happening. The effect of Susan's inaction was that her husband began to ignore her. Of course, you've also probably heard the term personal effects, which is a different use of the word altogether and not usually the one that people confuse. But then there's effect as a verb, and we usually pronounce it effect. Effect means to cause something to happen. An example in a sentence, Susan's behavior effected a change in her husband. So let's put all these things together in one sentence and see how that works out. Susan's flat affect effected a change in her husband by affecting his behavior, an effect she didn't like. This is a dreadful sentence, but you get the picture. Word pair number 2, between versus among. Now this word pair is used incorrectly so often, and people hear it so often, and I'm not sure people really understand that there's a difference between the usage of these 2 words. But it does make a difference in writing, and it makes a difference to editors who are reading your work. When you're writing incorrectly, it pegs you as an amateur. Now here's how to use these words, and it's really quite simple, much simpler than the previous one we talked about. Between is used when you are referring to 2 things, Among is used when referring to more than two. Here's an example. We divided the donuts equally between the two of us. We divided the donuts among the four of us. It's as simple as that. Word pair number 3, imply versus infer. No, these two words do not mean the same thing. In fact, they mean quite different things, and they are used incorrectly, and the one that's used incorrectly most often is infer. People use the word infer when they really mean imply, which implies to me that they don't know how to use the word and don't know what it means. But if you manage to get it right, your writing will be much more accurate and more easily understood. Here's how to use these words. To imply something means to strongly suggest that something is true. To infer means to draw a conclusion. Here's an example in sentences. Susan implied that I was trying to steal her husband. I inferred that she was angry. If you need a way to remember this, consider it this way. The word infer has the word in it. It comes from within. You've drawn a conclusion from within. So I inferred something means I drew a conclusion. So when in doubt, when you want somebody to be implying something, always use the word imply and don't use the word infer unless you're talking about drawing conclusions. Word pair number 4 is continuously versus continually. This is another pair of words where people seem to think that these two words mean exactly the same thing, and they don't. They're related to one another because they have the same root, but they don't mean the same thing. And the truth is that using them incorrectly actually muddies the meaning. Continuously means carrying on without pause or interruption, while continually refers to a situation, process, or activity that comes and goes with pauses and interruptions. Here are 2 examples. Susan cried continuously for 3 hours after her husband stormed out. And you can reasonably interpret that as meaning that she didn't stop crying. But the next one, over the next 3 months, Susan continually tried to contact her absent husband. And you can reasonably expect that she didn't do it 24 hours a day for 3 months, but she did it off and on continually. So continuously and continually do not mean the same thing. Word pair number 5, ultimate versus penultimate. Well, if you're like me and you're like most people, you've probably heard the word ultimate many more times than you've heard the word penultimate. And ultimate is usually used correctly, but penultimate is usually used incorrectly because people don't actually seem to know what it means, and it's really quite simple. Ultimate refers to something that is the best, the most extreme. Ultimate can also mean something that is last or final. Penultimate simply means second to last. And here's some examples. Susan made the ultimate sacrifice by agreeing to give up her children. Ultimately, she was alone again. Her husband's penultimate offer was for her to forgive him. His final suggestion was for her to leave him and the children. So it was a great story, wasn't it? Now let's get back to some editing. Talk to you next time. Subscribe to Write, Fix, Repeat. And maybe I can help you improve your writing knowledge and skills. 5 tips at a time.